Before I begin, I'd like to assure anyone who's listening that every word I'm about to say is true. I know it's going to be difficult for some people to believe the details I'm going to share, and I wouldn't even blame you, as my mind still can't comprehend the bizarre events I experienced on that fateful day. It all began on the 16th of March, 1982. I'd gotten a call that Tuesday morning informing me that I'd gotten the job I'd applied for earlier that month. I remember feeling ecstatic and excited about the call. I really thought I'd landed my dream job, but I had no idea that my life would never be the same after I started working at Friar Tuck's Game Room Arcade in Calumet City, Illinois. I'd been hired as an arcade technician to maintain the machines, fix whatever broke that day, and make sure the cabinets were running smoothly. I'd loved arcades for as long as I could remember. I remember opening up the cabinets, tracing the wires, and understanding how it all worked before putting the machine back together. This was how I learned to fix arcade machines and why I was hired by Friar Tuck's Game Room Arcade. I usually worked late at night when the arcade was closed, and I would take a long look at the machines that needed some attention. I fixed CRT glitches, board contact issues, control errors, blown fuses, and jammed coin mechanisms. I always started with my favorite machines, as I would open up and maintain the Defender cabinet first before looking at Centipede, Frogger, Cubert, Miss Pac-Man, and Robotron 2084. After I'd made sure all the cabinets were running smoothly, I would toss in a few coins and carry out several test runs by playing a couple of levels until the early morning hours. I can still recall one particular night when I spent a few hours fixing the control panel of an old Pac-Man machine before replacing the joysticks and buttons that had been worn out. Seeing the old cabinet come back to life always filled me with joy, as I knew some kid was going to have the time of his life when the arcade doors opened later that day. It didn't happen that often, but the arcade's owner sometimes called me in during the day to prep the games for peak hours. I will never forget the wide-eyed teens who stood to the side, waiting while I adjusted the monitor brightness on Donkey Kong and cleaned the coin slots for Tutankhamun. Getting to see their instant gratification whenever I fixed a cabinet motivated me to work even harder at night, as I always made sure there was a serviced machine ready for anyone who walked through the door. However, out of the many cabinets in Friar Tuck's Game Room Arcade, there was one particular machine I always tried to steer clear of in that arcade. Again, I know it's going to sound crazy, but it really seemed like the air in the arcade went eerily cold whenever I opened Berserk's cabinet. I'd heard a couple of strange things about Stern Electronics' popular game called Berserk. The game was released in November 1980, and it was designed by Alan McNeil, who said the idea for Berserk was inspired by a sci-fi-esque nightmare he once had. I initially didn't think there was anything wrong with Neil bringing his nightmare to life inside an arcade machine. However, when the machine first arrived at Friar Tuck's, I remember feeling a bit uneasy after I saw the cabinet's header spelling out the game's title in these bright yellow and orange colors that seemed like they were screaming at me to stay away. The game's cabinet was also foreign to me, as it had this newfangled pull-out drawer located at the front of the machine, which gave technicians easy access to all the game's logic boards. Most of the cabinets I worked on didn't have the modern pull-out drawer, and I remember being stumped when I went to open it up the old-fashioned way before I came across this mechanism that made it a lot easier to get to the board. Berserk's cabinet was known for introducing features that weren't common at the time, like speech synthesis, which was also the first time I'd seen it utilized. I was initially fascinated by the machine as I really admired the cabinet's engineering. I even liked the comic book style images that framed the screen with the red and blue triangular designs that had been rendered on the cabinet's sides. But whenever I went to take a closer look, I would get the sense of dread urging me to stay away. I'd read about the gameplay before the machine arrived, so I already knew Berserk was a multi-directional shooter where a player takes control of a little green sprite that traverses through randomly generated mazes guarded by multicolored, laser-wielding evil robots trying to kill you. The player's human-shaped avatar is also equipped with a laser as it tries to escape the maze, and while this was pretty standard for a multi-directional shooter, what I found unsettling was the game's titular villain, Evil Odo. Evil Odo was basically this bouncing yellow smiley face that chases your avatar if you stay in the maze too long. There was nothing inherently frightening about this smiley-faced villain, but for some reason, I found him extremely disturbing. Again, I don't know why, but everything in my body was telling me that there was something extremely dangerous about this arcade machine. I remember telling myself that the weird feeling would probably pass, but it never went away. I didn't understand why I felt this way at the time, but after the eerie and unexplainable events that occurred during the following weeks, I came to the realization that there was a sentient, malevolent evil that lay dormant inside Berserk's cabinet. These events started a few days after the machine arrived. I'd received a call from the arcade's owner one afternoon, telling me that the machine had been having a slew of issues. The cabinet apparently didn't turn on half the time, and when the machine did come on, it didn't allow the arcade's customers to play the game, as the screen kept glitching. I spent several long nights working on the cabinet as I fixed issues with the board connections, screen tearing, a sudden loss of brightness, and the faulty voice chip that kept acting up. Even with all my efforts, the machine refused to run smoothly, and no matter how many hours I spent fixing the cabinet, the game would mysteriously stop working or break down the very next day. I know this is going to sound crazy, but it really felt like Berserk's machine didn't want anyone to play the game, as it would shut down before anyone got a chance to even see the gameplay. I called a few arcade and game technicians back home, asking if the problems with the machine were a common issue. I'd initially thought the cabinet was intentionally designed with planned obsolescence to get arcades to buy more machines. I figured this would explain why the manufacturers made it easier for technicians to get to the board faster, as they already knew these problems would pop up. However, all the arcade technicians I reached out to told me that their Berserk machines were working perfectly fine, and they assured me that the constant issues I was facing was only happening with this particular Berserk cabinet. I was confused as I couldn't understand why this specific cabinet was having these issues, as it was a brand new machine. I spoke to the arcade's manager about it, but he didn't want to replace the cabinet since he'd just bought it, so it was up to me to get the game to work smoothly before the arcade's peak hours. I worked tirelessly on the cabinet, and I was able to find most of the problems. But one of the most stubborn issues I found extremely difficult to fix was the CRT's strange burn-in. The cabinet's monitor kept having this glitch with the game's high score, as even though the machine had already been used, the name Auto was burnt into the CRT, listing the name of the game's villain under the highest score. No matter how many times I tried to fix this issue, the glitch kept coming back. I even changed the monitor, hoping that it would solve the problem, but the issue persisted. My frustration with the issue kept growing with every passing day, but I wasn't going to give up, and it was at this point that I began noticing the strange effects the cabinet was having on me. It's hard to put the feeling into words, but anytime I opened the game's cabinet, I would suddenly feel sick and queasy. There was also this faint foul smell that I couldn't trace, but it made me feel nauseous and uneasy. I'd originally thought a little animal had died inside or something, but even after a thorough check, I didn't find anything. I also had this strange feeling in my gut, as it felt like the odd smell was a warning, telling me that I wasn't supposed to be opening the game's cabinet. Things only got worse from there as I eventually started having these horrific nightmares about the game's titular villain, Evil Otto. The nightmares always began the same way. I'm floating in this black, suffocating vacuum, and I can't breathe. This sudden bright flash, and I'm now standing in front of Berserk's arcade machine. I can't move my limbs or speak, and I stand there frozen, watching the screen for a few minutes before the monitor turns on by itself and displays the words, Otto's high score. My skin feels like it's being tugged by invisible painful strings, forcing me to play the game and beat Otto's high score. There's also this bright yellow hue emanating from behind me, and it feels like I'm standing in front of a large yellow neon sign. I always get this feeling of dread around this point, but no matter how hard I try, I can't turn my head to see where the bright yellow light is coming from. This part of the nightmare feels like an eternity, and I can do nothing but watch as the imperceptible strings pull me forward like a puppet as I'm forced to beat the game's levels. I can feel someone breathing down my neck whenever I'm close to beating the high score, and even though the person behind me doesn't say anything, I can tell he's going to kill me if I beat Otto's high score. This is where the nightmare usually ends, as I always wake up screaming just before I'm able to beat the game's high score. No matter what I did, I would always have the same nightmare every night during the last few weeks of March 1982. I genuinely felt terrified to sleep, as I still found myself being forced to play the cursed Berserk video game in my dreams during the early days of April 1982. It felt like I was losing my mind during this period of my life, and on some particular nights when I was working in the arcade, I would begin to hear these eerie whispers coming from Berserk's cabinet. I couldn't really make out what the whispers were saying as the voices were extremely low, but the only word I could make out was the name Otto. I knew I couldn't tell my manager what I was going through because he'd probably think I was insane and fire me on the spot. I also didn't share my weird experience with my family, as I knew they would think I was going crazy and put me in a mental clinic. I refused to let my bizarre and unexplainable phobia of Berserk's arcade machine ruin my dream job, so even though it was difficult, I continued working on the cabinet. It took a lot of time, but I eventually managed to fix the machine's persistent CPU glitches. I even changed the cabinet's monitor again just to cover all of my bases and to make sure everything was working perfectly. Working on that cabinet had cost me many sleepless nights, but I'd finally done it, and the high score glitch was gone. I was able to fix the machine just in time for the arcade's peak hours, and I remember seeing a teenager going ham on the game until he got the high score. I was glad the game's incessant issues had been resolved, and the arcade's customers could now play Berserk whenever they wanted to. I also hoped I wouldn't have to open the game's cabinet anymore, and that the morbid nightmares would now stop. But it wasn't long before I realized how wrong I was. There are no words to explain how I felt in that moment. I was just about to leave the arcade when I heard a loud thud, and I turned around to see the teen who'd just been playing Berserk a few seconds ago lying dead on the floor. I screamed as the arcade's staff surrounded the boy and called an ambulance. The disturbing news of the teenager's strange death at Firetuck's arcade baffled everyone who heard it, and it wasn't long before it was carried by local news outlets. I quit the very next morning, as I didn't want to be anywhere near Berserk's cabinet or the cursed video game ever again. My mind was never able to truly comprehend these bizarre events or why they were only caused by the specific arcade machine standing in Friar Tuck's game room. As I mentioned earlier, I was never really the same after working in Friar Tuck's arcade. I found it extremely difficult to sleep during the months following the incident, so I began using medication for chronic PTSD-related nightmares, as I would religiously take prozazine and trazodone. The pills didn't help much, and despite all my efforts, these accursed nightmares still persist, as Otto keeps coming back to torment me every night when I close my eyes. I always plead with him to leave me alone, but he tells me he won't stop, until he takes my life and eats my soul. On the 3rd of April, 1982, an 18-year-old named Peter Bukowski walked into Friar Tuck's Game Room arcade, which was located at 674 River Oaks Drive in Calumet City, Illinois. The teenager spent approximately 15 minutes playing Stern Electronics' popular game Berserk until he got his name on the machine's high score board. Unfortunately, a few seconds after he'd achieved the game's high score, he collapsed and died. The mysterious circumstances surrounding the teenager's death gained widespread attention, and it wasn't long before several eerie theories began to circulate. Even though Deputy Lake County Coroner Mark Allen later confirmed that Bukowski had died from a heart attack due to pre-existing scar tissue, the public believed that there was something more sinister that led to his death. The coroner's report noted that the pre-existing scar tissue on Bukowski's heart was a hidden condition, which would make it medically plausible that extreme stress could have triggered the attack, but the public wasn't convinced, as they believed he was killed by the cursed Berserk video game arcade cabinet in Friar Tuck's game room. There have been several disturbing incidents surrounding that specific Berserk arcade machine in Friar Tuck's game room in Calumet City, Cook County, Illinois. Friar Tuck's game room was opened in February of 1982 by a local real estate professional, Tom Blankley. Blankley had initially started the arcade to bring back some life to the Sherwood Forest Plaza, but the arcade eventually became Blankley's main business. He ran the medieval-themed arcade with his wife, Jo Blankley, from 1982 into the early 2000s, and during that period, one particular arcade machine gained notoriety for being cursed. It was widely believed by the locals that anyone who played this game or beat the high score would immediately die under unusual and mysterious circumstances. One of the first records of these mysterious deaths dates back to the unconfirmed case of Jeff Daly, a 19-year-old who supposedly suffered a myocardial infarction after achieving the game's high score. The details surrounding Daly's case are extremely sparse, and while many believe it was a hoax based on Peter Bukowski's case, other locals have claimed to have known Jeff Daly and witnessed the death. There was another similar report from March 1988, when 17-year-old Edward Clark Jr. was stabbed by another teenager at Friar Tuck's game room. The records following the teen's death are contradictory, as while some locals claim the stabbing was caused by Berserker's cabinet, several witnesses claim Clark didn't touch the game. Out of the many deaths linked to the cabinet, The most prominent one is Peter Bukowski's case. The teenager's death was reported by the Chicago Tribune in 1982, and several witnesses confirmed that they had seen Bukowski walk into Friar Tuck's game room with a friend around 3:30 p.m. that afternoon before his death. Several eyewitness statements also confirmed that Bukowski had beaten the game's high score. The teen then walked over to a nearby cabinet and put in a quarter when he suddenly collapsed. Investigation into these mysterious deaths later revealed that no other copy of Stern's Electronics' Berserk video game or its arcade cabinets caused myocardial infarction or immediate death. At the end of these investigations, it was confirmed that it was only the specific Berserk cabinet in Friar Tuck's game room that was cursed. There have been several efforts to trace the machine ever since Friar Tuck's arcade closure in 2003, but no one has been able to track down the whereabouts of this particular Berserk cabinet in Calumet City, Illinois. While the search for the elusive cabinet continues, the cursed video game that once terrified Friar Tuck's arcade during the late 90s is still out there somewhere, killing any player who beats the machine's high score to this very day.
I met him during a game raid. That is how most online friendships start when you are a teenage gamer. You spend hours every night in games with strangers who start to feel like real friends because you beat hard levels together and shared jokes that nobody else would understand. His username was Shadow Knight 87, and at first he seemed normal. He was good at the game, funny in the chat, and knew when to be serious and when to joke around. We played together for weeks before he asked if we could talk on a private messaging app. I said yes without thinking twice because that is what gamers do when they want to talk without the whole team listening. The private messages started out normal. We talked about the game, new updates, in which characters were getting weaker. He asked where I was from and I told him Oregon. That felt safe because Oregon is a big state. He said he was from California, that he was 23 and worked with computers. Gaming was how he relaxed after work. I told him I was 17, still in high school, trying to balance homework and gaming and my social life. He seemed nice about it. He told me to make sure I got enough sleep and to not let gaming mess up my grades. But slowly, the way he talked to me started to change. He started asking more personal questions. He wanted to know what school I went to, what my schedule was like, if I had a boyfriend, if I went to parties or stayed home most of the time. I answered some questions but kept things vague. I felt uncomfortable with how nosy he was getting, but I did not want to be rude. He noticed when I was online and when I logged off. He made comments about my patterns like he had been watching. He would say things like, "I see you always play between 8 and midnight on weekdays, and you are online all day on Saturdays." At first, it felt nice, like someone was paying attention to me. But then it started to feel like he was spying on me. One night, he asked if we could video chat. I said no. I told him I do not video chat with people I only know online. His reply came back fast and sounded angry. "Why not? Do you not trust me? We have been playing together for months. I thought we were friends." I tried to explain that it was not about trust. It was just a rule I had. But he kept pushing. He kept asking why I was being so secretive, what I was hiding, if I had lied about who I was. The conversation made me feel sick and worried, like I had done something wrong by saying no. I logged off without saying goodbye. The next day I found a friend request from him on my real social media account. The one with my actual name and photos of me and my family and my school. My stomach dropped. I had never told him my real name. I had never told him anything that would help him find my real-life account. But somehow he found me. He went looking until he matched my game username to my real identity. Now he knew what I looked like, where I went to school, and who my friends were. I blocked him right away. My hands were shaking. I kept thinking back through every conversation we ever had, trying to remember if I accidentally told him something that helped him find me. He made new accounts. Every time I blocked one, another one appeared within hours. He sent me messages that were sometimes apologetic and sometimes scary. "I'm sorry if I scared you. I just want to talk. Why are you ignoring me? I thought we had something special. You cannot just cut me off like this." I stopped playing the game completely. I deleted my account. I told my team I was taking a break, but did not tell them why. But the messages kept coming on different apps, different usernames. He always found me no matter how many times I blocked him. He started commenting on old photos I posted years ago. He liked posts from accounts I had forgotten about. He was going through everything, looking at my whole online life. Then he told me he was coming to see me. The message came late at night. It sounded casual, but it terrified me. I'm going to be in Oregon next week for work. We should finally meet in person. I think we would really connect face to face. My blood went cold. He knew I lived in Oregon, but I never told him which city. I never gave him enough information to find me. But he was talking about visiting like it was normal, like he had not spent weeks stalking me online and ignoring every time I told him to stop. I told my parents everything that night. I showed them the messages, the fake accounts, the comments on old photos, the plan to come find me. They called the police right away. The officer said I did the right thing by telling someone. He said cases like this often get worse and turn from online threats to real danger. They started investigating. They tracked his computer location. They found out he had been lying about where he lived and how old he was and probably everything else. He was not in California, he was in Washington, less than 6 hours away from where I live. The police arrested him before he could make the trip. They found proof on his computer that he had already looked up routes to my city. He had screenshots of my house from Google Maps. He had been planning this for weeks. The detective told me I was lucky. He said my gut feeling to call the police when I did probably saved my life. He said men like this do not stop at online messages when they have already spent this much time and effort being obsessed. He was charged with stalking and trying to kidnap me. He was found guilty and sent to prison for several years. I do not play games online anymore. I deleted every social media account that had my real name. I made new ones with fake information and locked the privacy settings so tight that strangers cannot find me. I changed my username everywhere. I made sure nothing connected my new accounts to the old me back when I thought online friends were safe and private. My parents put security cameras around our house. We changed our phone numbers. They made me promise I would never share personal information with anyone I meet on the internet. Sometimes I think about all the conversations we had before things got scary, all the game levels we beat together, all the times I laughed at his jokes and thought I had found someone who understood me. I wonder how much of it was real and how much was him pretending and planning. I wonder if he ever really cared about the game or if I was always his target, the real reason he was there while I thought we were just playing together. The worst part is not what happened, but what could have happened. What if I had not trusted my gut when his behavior started feeling wrong? What if I had said yes to that video chat or given him more information or agreed to meet him in person before I realized he was dangerous? I survived because I said no. I survived because I told adults. I survived because I took the danger seriously even when part of me wanted to believe I was being dramatic. Not every teenager who meets a predator online is that lucky. If you are watching this and you play games online or have internet friends you have never met in real life, please understand that not everyone is who they say they are. That funny, skilled player who seems to get you might be someone collecting your information, building your trust, waiting for you to let your guard down. Trust your gut, set limits, and the second someone starts crossing those limits, making you uncomfortable or asking for personal information, walk away and tell someone you trust. The friend you think you made online might be a predator who has been hunting you since the first message. Realizing that before it's too late is the difference between a scary story you survived and a tragedy that never should have happened.
My name is Alex. My younger brother Matt and I spend hours playing video games, but Minecraft was our favorite. We had a private server that our friends Liam, Chris, and Danny would connect to. We had created it months before, building a world that was our after-school retreat. One night, we decided to start a new game with a challenge: extreme survival. It was routine, but that night was different. It was close to 10 o'clock. Matt, who was sitting next to me in the same room, his PC and mine shared the long desk we had improvised with a couple of boards and easels. Our friends were connected from their homes. Everything started as normal. We felled trees, gathered stones, and started building a small fortress on a hill. There was laughter in the voice chat as we discussed which blocks to use for the roof and how to avoid creep attacks. But there was one detail that, at the time, none of us took seriously. In the distance, on a mountain, someone saw a figure. "Who else is on the server?" "There's no one else. There are 5 of us. It's private, remember?" There was a brief silence, but Danny broke it with a laugh.
It's probably a bug. Let's go to sleep. It's getting dark already.
"So soon? We just logged on."
I mean in the game.
We all laughed, and by that time we ignored what had happened and continued playing. A couple of hours later, things started to get weird. We were exploring a cave, looking for iron and coal, when Liam shouted into the voice chat, "Hey, someone's down here with me. Who is it? Any skin changes?" "What are you seeing?" "I don't know. It was a figure. It had no name on it, as if it was a mob, but it moved like a player." I got to his position along with Matt, but there was nothing there, just a dark tunnel. Chris and Danny arrived shortly after. Liam insisted he had seen it, but we all assumed it was a bug. Until the first sign appeared. It was at the entrance to the tunnel, right where we had gathered. A wooden sign like any other in the game, but the message froze us in our tracks. "Go away." "Who put this up?" No one answered. We checked the server commands, but there was no record of suspicious activity. We thought it was some prank by Chris, but he swore he had nothing to do with it. We continued to play. Although the laughter gradually died down, the tension was palpable. We were all afraid that a hacker had gotten into the game and might do something to us on the computer. That's when the game chat was filled with messages. Dots repeated over and over again as if someone was typing it manually. We all saw it, but none of us typed it. Then Liam said his screen went black and his character died instantly. "How did you die?" "I don't know. I just disappeared. And now I can't get back in. It says the server is full." No one else was having trouble logging in or out, but Liam was locked out. We decided to restart the server. While we were doing that, Matt mentioned something strange. On his screen, the eyeless figure Liam had seen earlier appeared briefly. I thought he was joking, but the concern in his voice was genuine. When we returned to the game, we were in the same place. Things seemed normal at first, but then, as we explored, Danny said something that sent a shiver down my spine.
My torches are disappearing. I just put one up and it went out.
It must be lag. Sometimes it happens when the server gets overloaded. But it wasn't lag. There was no explanation for what came next. Blocks disappearing around us, walls building themselves, and signs appearing out of nowhere. This time they said more specific things. I gave them a warning. Suddenly, Chris shouted, "My screen! I can't move!" We watched as his character froze while a figure appeared behind him. It wasn't a mob, it wasn't a player. It was humanoid, but the eyes, they were completely white. Before we could react, Chris disappeared from the server. "Damn it! This is a hacker. He's messing with us." We have to call Chris and tell him to turn off his computer. He's capable of doing it. "Chris, are you there?" There was no answer. Matt and I tried calling him on the phone, but no one answered. There were 3 of us left: Matt, Danny, and me. We kept playing more out of inertia than anything else. We were waiting for Chris to come back and answer the phone, but when we came out of the cave, the world had changed. Everything was covered in fog, and the trees were distorted shapes. I found another sign. It said, "Herobrine is here." I froze. I knew about that legend. Every Minecraft player knew about it. A supposed entity that appeared in worlds, a deceased developer or worse. I had always taken it as just a story. Possibly the hacker was taking it too seriously. Matt began to panic. "We have to shut this down. Now!" But before we could get out of the game, the lights in the house flickered. We looked at each other in silence, and then we heard a noise in the hallway. It was as if someone was walking toward our door. But I don't mean our base or something in-game. This was in our house. The door to the room burst open. No one was there, but the sound of footsteps continued as if someone invisible was inside. Matt and I jumped up, leaving the keyboards lying around. That's when we saw a silhouette in the hallway, just down the hall. It was motionless, with its head cocked to one side. I ran to close the door, but before I could do so, the lights went out completely. All we could hear was our breathing and the approaching footsteps. When the lights came back on, the figure was in the room. It said nothing. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there watching us with its white eyes. It was wearing the same pixelated Minecraft clothes, but its body was real. Matt grabbed a lamp and threw it, but the figure didn't move. It just disappeared. In the game, Danny shouted, "Guys, there's someone in my house. He's coming towards me." And then his connection went dead. Matt and I decided to get out of the house, but the front door was blocked. We tried to break a window, but the shadows... No, the walls seemed to move to prevent us from leaving. It was then that the figure appeared again, staring at us. We didn't know what to do. We felt like two living dead people. We knew we couldn't escape or fight. We screamed loudly, but our parents were gone and no one could come to save us. Out of nowhere, Matt had the impulse to violently hit his computer. I did the same with mine. And just like that, as if nothing had happened, it was all over. After that night, Matt and I stopped playing video games for months. But the worst thing was what I found weeks later when going through the files on my computer when we repaired it. There was a screenshot I didn't remember taking. It was of the figure, looking directly at me through the monitor. The white eyes were still there.
Hi, my name is Nathan, and I was once addicted to video games. Just like any teenager, I would play games whenever I had free time. I was 16 years old when this incident happened. I just started playing Call of Duty with my friends. I was super addicted, and I don't want to brag, but I was pretty good. I was better than my friends who had played video games before me. A single mom raised me, and we didn't have much. I knew how hard my mom worked, so that I couldn't ask for much. While growing up, I played games mostly at my friend's house. On my 12th birthday, my mom finally blessed me with a PlayStation 2. It was cheap, but I appreciated it. Ever since then, I have saved up my money to buy video games. On the day of the incident, I'd invited my friends over to my house to hang out. After eating, we decided to play video games. As usual, I was leading in the games we were playing. My friends are always bragging about how good I am at video games, and sometimes people even challenge me, and I always win. After a while, my friends went to their various houses, so I decided to clean up and play some more games. After cleaning up, I went to my room and started playing Call of Duty. It was going well until someone got mad and started complaining. His username was A Slow Death. Every time I won, he kept saying I'm cheating. I wondered how that was possible, so I told him he was dumb. He got so mad and started cursing me out. When I realized how serious the situation was getting, I decided to apologize. "I'm sorry, man, it's not that deep." The apology worsened the situation as he continued insulting me. I decided to stop playing for a while, so I left the room. I went to bed that night wondering how someone could take a game so seriously. It's not as if I was killing or hurting him for real. It was just a game. I guess it's more than a game to some, I said that night. The next day after my football practice, I started to continue my game, but to my surprise, not long after I started playing, Slow Death joined the room. I thought it must have been someone else with a similar username, until I heard his voice. "You ran away last night like a coward, and let's see if you can beat me now." I laughed silently because it was becoming pathetic. After beating him severely, he started mumbling some words, and it was obvious he was getting upset. I didn't say anything. I just kept laughing, and he kept getting angry. I was having fun beating him until I had the scare of my life. "Oh, keep laughing, Nathan. I'm coming for you." It took me 5 seconds before I realized he had just called my name. I froze for a while. How was it possible for him to know my name? My username is not similar to my name. "How did you know my name?" I said, stammering in fear. "I know everything about you, and your pathetic mother. I'm coming to hurt you." I turned off my video game immediately and started panicking. I took my phone and called my mom. She was safe at work. I let out a sigh of relief and locked all the doors. I called my friend and explained what had happened. I was so scared, but he calmed me down, saying it was just a guess. So I calmed down and decided he was just a freak trying to threaten him. After a while, I decided to continue playing my game and ignore the troll. Immediately, when I started playing, this guy popped up again. This time, I was ready for him. Once he started insulting me, I charged back at him. We went back and forth insulting each other. As soon as he mentioned my mom, I insulted his mom too. I said words like, "Your mom's a dirty bitch. You're a bastard and a coward. If you show up in front of me, I'm going to beat you just like I beat you here," I said, laughing hysterically. Suddenly, he went offline, so I thought he ran off like a scaredy cat. Little did I know, I was about to experience hell. It was getting late and my mom was still at work. She was running late that night. I was in my bedroom texting when I heard a knock on the door. It was weird because it was late. Did my mom forget her keys again? Before I could leave my room, the knocking started getting aggressive. I walked to the door and shouted, "Mom, is that you?" There was no reply. I was about to open the door when I heard a familiar voice. "I'm not your mom, you fool. Open this door and beat me like you promised to." Chills ran down my spine. My eyes popped as I moved away from the door. Is that who I think it is? I thought to myself. "Slow Death?" I called out. My voice shook like I was in front of a hungry tiger. He let out an evil laugh. "I'm glad you recognize my voice. Now open this door before I force my way in," he said. This time he was banging on the door. I ran into my room, took my phone and called the police. "The police will be here anytime soon. You better leave now," I said confidently. Instead, he started banging on the door with his body, hoping to force himself in. I knew he was going to break the door because my door was cheap and weak, so I ran to my room and locked the door and windows. It wasn't long before he broke in. I could hear him scavenging through my house, and finally, he got to my door. It wasn't long before he broke it. I was ready for him. I was pretty athletic myself. I took a bat from my drawer as a weapon. When he entered, I knew I was in trouble. He was at least 6'4". His muscles were huge like a wrestler's, and he looked at least 30. I stood in my room, frozen, staring at the monster-like man ready to pound me at any moment. I was trying so hard to control my emotions, but I couldn't help myself. I started crying. "I called the police already. Leave now, and I won't tell the police anything. If you hurt me, you'll go to jail," I said in tears. "I'm not scared of jail," he said as he walked close to me and punched me in the face. I fell to the ground. I'd never felt such pain before. I cried. Blood was already all over my face, and I started begging for my life. He grabbed me by the collar and lifted me like I was nothing. His horrible breath was the least of my problems as he threw me across the room. I couldn't believe what was happening. I quickly pulled myself together and crawled outside my room. He strolled behind me and stepped on my legs, preventing me from moving. "Where do you think you're going?" he said as he applied more pressure on my leg. I screamed in pain as I begged for my life, and then he started kicking my stomach, calling me names. I thought I would die. What would become of my mother? She'll come home to her dead son's body lying on the ground. Hot tears flowed down my eyes. She still hasn't gotten over my dad's death, and now her only son is about to be brutally murdered in his home. I had already given up until I heard the police siren. When Slow Death heard the siren, he tried running, but the police caught and arrested him, and I was taken to the hospital by paramedics. Slow Death was a wanted criminal who had just escaped prison. He was taken back to the prison where he belonged, and with tighter security. After almost a month, I was discharged from the hospital. Thankfully, my injuries weren't severe, but I suffered a broken leg. I could walk, but the doctor said I couldn't play football again, and my dream was shattered. Football was the only hope I had to go to college, and it was ruined because of a psycho who got angry over a video game. I couldn't play video games, as the shock was too much for me to handle. We couldn't afford therapy, so I burnt all my games, and ever since, I quit video games and focused on my education.